Hey, folks, we're back, and Mitch and I were both in Philadelphia at the AWS Reinforce conference, and there's been some criticism level that AWS and all the cloud service providers for may hiding a little bit too much behind shared responsibility. But it looks like, to me at least, that AWS stepped up its game considerably, and it's making it easier to both see where the vulnerabilities are, how critical they are, and in some cases, proactively going out to prevent them. So, Mitch, you were there with me. What was your take on what was going on here?
Well, I think you coined the term right. I think in one of your articles was a bevy of announcements, and of course AWS has never been known for underwhelming us with a number of announcements. There's always a lot of them. Probably the biggest one, frankly, was Amy Herzog, who came out as the new CISO for AWS. She has been with AWS, I think, about maybe a couple of years, and comes out of MITRE and VMware and some other experiences. Chris Betts, the former CISO, left so somewhat unexpectedly on his terms. He's going to start something new, but we don't know what that is yet. And Amy had 3 weeks to prepare to give the keynote, to give a 2.5 hour keynote. It was pretty remarkable. She did a fantastic job, and I think will be a great CISO for her. There were a lot of announcements, and some of them, like you said, Mike, they were kind of filling in the gaps, but more shoring up, pulling information together. They announced a revamped AWS Security Hub about identifying vulnerabilities. They did a AWS Shield service, which is more of a dashboard around configuration mistakes and things that are happening with they can identify with Amazon Q. There's a network firewall to be able to, you'll appreciate this, Alan, to do more automatic responses to traffic. That sounds like an IDS, IPS argument again. Having PTSD on that one. So there are a number of things around kind of network security, cloud security, configuration security. There was an announcement with CrowdStrike, with Falcon, being able to kind of integrate better with that service offered by Falcon and AWS for more endpoint security. Fernando Montenegro, the lead of security for Futurum, it did a nice analysis of it. Kind of called it sort of undifferentiated heavy lifting, meaning there's other areas where the cloud provider AWS can step in and help customers instead of them having to assemble all the tools into the monitoring management. I think where this is all going is more automation, not just at the firewall level, but across the board. The area that I was also particularly interested in were things around their security incident response process, but also Inspector is getting more into the scanning a code when it's pulled, as well as when you push updates to the repository, software composition analysis. It's getting into other people's business as well, but they're also doing things like integrating with GitHub and GitLab in the DevOps space. So it isn't a total go it alone. So there's some key partnering things that I think were announced there. Anyway, I could take 20 minutes and rattle off all the announcements, and I don't think they're all worthy of that level of conversation, but I think those are the kinds of trends and things that I saw. Mike, what were your thoughts? Did I miss some key things?
Yeah, there were two things that kind of leapt out at me. One is they did a really awesome demo of Amazon Q Developer being used to find vulnerabilities and then create the patch and test the patch and putting that in front of developers. So it was kind of like the ultimate shift left demo for DevSecOps using AI tools. And the second thing is they talked about how they are now have a team that's investigating DDoS attacks and that goes and finds the networks where the spoofs are coming through, and then actually calls those people and says, hey, your system has been compromised. And if they don't respond, then they go down the next level and they go after their DNS. And if they don't get that, then they go down to the local telecom company and say, hey, you got to cut these guys off. And so they were kind of suggesting that was going to become a bigger model for them, and they were going to apply this to other things besides DDoS. And it's felt like, finally somebody was getting aggressive about this stuff. So those are the two things that leaked out at me.
Fred, I got a question for you. As the CEO of a cyber company, you hear about what Amazon is doing to do a better job with cloud security. Do you consider that friend or foe? Is that competition? Is that someone you work with? Can they do a better job? I mean, typically Amazon rolls out things that are 80-20. They're 80% of what a private solution is at 20% of the price. And for some people, that's enough. How do you view you listening to this report, Fred?
I think it's great. I don't fear anything that Amazon is doing. I would say it's long overdue. And, as you said, right, it's typically roll out a capability and, sort of craft your own, way of utilizing it. The challenge is, and a lot of this stuff sort of rolls up into the cloud security posture management problem space, which, Amazon's getting eaten alive by their direct competitors for this. Similarly to the development lifecycle with, a GitHub that's already doing the vast majority of this. It's a little bit of, I've got to meet the market where the market is. And I like a lot of the ideas that make it easier to, build infrastructure, to validate your code as secure, to deploy code successfully, and to operate your security controls as a practitioner. So, when you provide services to any of your customers and having the nice, signed paper that says you're SOC 2 compliant, terrific. Shared responsibility? No, there's none of that. So this opportunity allows people that build software, build services for customers to not only do a better job with what they already have, but it empowers folks that don't have a team to do those things to make it more successful for them. So I think it's terrific. I think it's long overdue. How valuable it becomes over time, I think, is what the market's going to dictate. But I'm thrilled to see it. It's about time.
Fred, there was also another angle that I'd love to get your opinion on, because while AWS makes its network and security services open enough to people to tweak themselves if they're so inclined, they were just suggesting that that was a pointless exercise because people can't respond fast enough to the attacks that are coming out there, and they might as well just lean on AWS to automate that whole thing end to end for them. And there's not a lot of point because humans can't update the firewalls fast enough, can't detect the attacks fast enough, and the whole thing needs to be automated in real time. So it was time to move on from network and security operations constructs.
That sounds awesome. Heavy eye roll. Everybody says that. No one does. The problem that we have isn't the largest problem that we have isn't whether or not there is dynamic asymmetric attacking happening all day long. It does. That's what happens on the cloud infrastructure in a public cloud provider. But the challenge is that once a thing is compromised, you have 49 minutes for that to be broken out of and to expand laterally and do other things. If we said that really is just something that the cloud provider should handle, and we know that 60% of the vulnerabilities on the KEV, the exposures and vulnerabilities list for known exploited vulnerabilities are cybersecurity vendors, what makes a cloud provider any different? So I don't buy into that at all. But I do believe that having more tools available to make better decisions is super important. I'd love to see some of the things they talk about around Kubernetes and container security and things that help influence that. They have services that don't offer that today. So if you use EKS, for example, please help me go back to the to the base images that you provide and make sure that those things are secure from the ground up. So let's mind the kitchen before we start talking about the front of the house.
Guard Duty now it supports EKS, but that's about the only thing they said about EKS.
Yeah, exactly. There was one interesting use case, and this wasn't necessarily talked about as an announcement, but as I was going around and talking to different AWS people, meeting with some folks, something that I wasn't really that familiar with, it was probably rolls right off the tongue for Fred, but this idea of it's called domain generation algorithm. So in other words, it's automated generation of domain names that they do on a very short interval, and that's what they use to attack from new domains. And then over time, the cloud providers, others can start to identify that those are actually being used for nefarious purposes and cutting those off. But then the bad guys are using more generative AI to create more familiar types of generated names, so it's not less obvious that those are generated through algorithms. But I was talking to some folks about this is a good place where you bring together automation, you bring together machine learning because you have so much data in very short intervals that you can start to identify these more and then implement that into like their DNS firewall, into guard duty and tools like that. So you can kind of see the combination of technologies. Maybe it's a little bit of sausage making, but I found that interesting. Like, okay, that's a real use case where AI, in this case, machine learning, is being used to combat kind of Gen AI generated attacks.
The one thing I did continue to feel is there's too many damn SKUs. I can't keep track of all the products and all the things that these things do. And I'm kind of like, can we just make this simpler or be better?
That was a common question in our meetings. Like, so is that a new SKU or is that part of an existing one?
AI will solve that. Don't worry. We're gonna start tracking SKU reduction caused by AI. Yeah, I think Vermont's signing up for that one. Anyway, guys, good way to end our Friday. Have a great weekend. My gang members, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for watching us. We, as usual, have a full TechStrong TV schedule behind us. We'll be back Monday with a fresh gang show. But until then, on behalf of John, Lisa, Fred, Mitch, Mike, and myself, have a great weekend, everyone. We're out of here.